There's a major warning coming out of Xbox leadership right now, and it could have a real impact on the next generation of gaming hardware, especially when it comes to price and availability. Newly appointed Xbox CEO Asha Sharma has confirmed that a growing memory chip shortage is something Microsoft is actively dealing with as it plans its next console, currently codenamed Project Helix. And this isn't just a minor supply hiccup. It's part of a much bigger shift happening across the entire tech industry that could reshape how consoles are built, sold, and even launched. In a recent interview, Sharma was asked directly whether memory shortages could impact the timeline for Project Helix, and her response made it clear that this is absolutely part of the equation. That alone should get your attention because when a company at that level openly acknowledges supply constraints before a product is even formally revealed, it usually means the issue is serious enough that they can't ignore it or spin around it. This isn't speculation from analysts or rumors from insiders. This is coming straight from the top. To really understand why this matters, you have to look at what's driving the shortage in the first place. It's not gaming demand, it's not even traditional consumer electronics. The biggest factor right now is the explosion of artificial intelligence infrastructure. Companies are racing to build massive AI data centers, and those systems require enormous amounts of high performance memory, far more than a typical console ever would. And because those companies are operating at a completely different financial scale, they're willing to pay significantly more to secure supply. That creates a situation where console manufacturers are effectively competing for the same resources, but without the same pricing power. And when that happens, the consequences are pretty predictable. Costs go up, supply tightens, and the pressure gets passed down the chain. If memory chips become more expensive or harder to source in large quantities, then building a next generation console becomes more expensive. There's no way around that. The question then becomes how companies like Microsoft respond. Do they absorb these costs and take a loss on hardware, hoping to make it back through software and services? Or do they raise the price of the console itself and ask consumers to carry more of that burden up front? If you look at recent trends, it's not hard to see where things might be headed. Console prices have already been creeping upward, and we've seen companies become more comfortable adjusting pricing after launch depending on market conditions. So the idea that Project Helix could launch at a higher price point than expected, or even higher than current generation systems, isn't far fetched. In fact, it might be the most realistic outcome if these memory shortages continue. But pricing is only one side of the problem. Availability is the other, and that's where things could even get more frustrating for players. Anyone who tried to get a PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X at launch remembers how difficult that was. Stock shortages, online queues, instant sellouts, and resellers dominating the market. It became a defining part of that generation's early life, and that situation was largely driven by manufacturing slowdowns and global logistics issues. What we're looking at now is different. This isn't about factories struggling to keep up. It's about raw components being pulled in a different direction entirely. If AI companies continue to dominate the memory market, there's a real possibility that next generation consoles could launch into a similarly constrained environment. Limited supply at launch doesn't just frustrate consumers. It changes the entire dynamic of how a console generation begins. It affects adoption rates, software sales, developer priorities, and even the perception of the platform itself. A strong launch matters, and supply constraints can undermine that before the system even has a chance to prove itself. What makes this situation even more significant is that it's not isolated to Xbox. Sony is going to be dealing with the same pressures as it develops what comes after the PlayStation 5. Nintendo, while operating in a slightly different hardware space, still relies on many of the same global supply chains. PC hardware manufacturers are already feeling the impact, especially when it comes to high end components. This is an industry wide challenge, and it suggests that the next generation of gaming hardware could be shaped as much by external technological trends as by the ambitions of the companies building it. There's also a design implication here that doesn't get talked about enough. If memory becomes more expensive or harder to secure, it could influence how consoles are architected. Developers have become accustomed to certain baselines when it comes to RAM and bandwidth, and those expectations shape how games are built. If hardware manufacturers have to make compromises to keep costs under control, that could ripple outward into game design itself. On the flip side, if they push forward with high end specs despite the cost, that reinforces the likelihood of higher retail prices. Either way, something has to give. And that brings us back to why Sharma's comments matter. When leadership at this level starts openly acknowledging these pressures, it's usually because they're already deep into planning and can see how these factors are going to play out over time. This isn't a last minute issue. It's something that's being factored into decisions right now about what Project Helix will ultimately be. The specs, the pricing strategy, the launch window, the supply projections. This memory situation touches all of it. For players, this is one of those moments where it's worth paying attention early, because by the time a console is officially revealed, a lot of those decisions are already locked in. What we're hearing now is a glimpse into the challenges shaping that process behind the scenes. And if trends continue in this direction, we could be heading into a generation where buying a console at launch is more expensive, more competitive, and potentially more uncertain than ever before. At the same time, it's not all doom and gloom. The industry has adapted to challenges before, and there's always the possibility that supply chains stabilize, new manufacturing capacity comes online, or alternative technologies help ease the pressure. But right now, based on what's being said publicly, this is something companies are taking seriously. And that means it's something players should at least be aware of as we look ahead. Now I want to hear from you. If the next Xbox ends up launching at a significantly higher price because of these memory shortages, are you still jumping in on day one, or does that make you wait it out and see how things develop? Let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any future uploads. If you want to go even deeper, check out my Patreon. My latest exclusive is a detailed look at why games keep launching broken and no one seems to stop it. And I think it really connects to a lot of what's happening in the industry right now. Thanks for watching, and as always, game on.